Our first house we had this laundry room. It's kind of laundry room, bathroom combination thing. And my wife wanted some shelves put up, and so I was, I'm new at all this, but I'm putting up the shelves, and I feel like I'm doing a really good job at all this stuff. And I put up the shelves, and we put everything up on there, and I noticed a couple weeks later, right under where I nailed the shelf into the wall, we started having this big orange spot show up. And I thought, well, what in the world is all this all about? So I thought, I'm surprised I didn't notice that before when I put up the shelf. So I get some paint, and I paint over this orange spot. And maybe a month or so later, I look back in there, and this orange spot's back again. I go, what in the world is this paint? Would I get some bad paint or something? So I get some more paint and paint over it again. And a couple months later, I see this orange spot again, and then it's something, I have a realization. Something else is wrong here. There's a deeper problem here than just the paint. And what it turned out, it happened when I had put up the shelf on the wall, I had punctured through the drain from the upstairs bathroom. So it was just kind of seeping into the walls and stuff. Yeah, fun stuff. Being a homeowner is fun. So that's when I realized something better, something deeper has to happen. So I painted over it again for a couple more months until I got enough time to actually do something about it. But it's funny that this is typically, even though we laugh at how maybe silly that is typically how we try to solve problems in our own life. Since the spot is what everybody sees, since the spot is what's visible, we think, well, I'll try to hide the spot. That's what I want to do. That's my goal in life is I want to make sure that nobody else sees the problem that's going on behind the scenes. And so, yeah, we laugh at me painting the walls instead of getting to the root of the problem, which is the broken pipe. We do the same thing with our life. We have maybe some deep issues that need to be addressed, but instead of addressing those, what we really do is just hide it, make sure just nobody sees anything. We just put a Band-Aid on it. We have these deeper issues, but nobody wants to go in and tear out the drywall. I mean, who's got time for that? Jesus, as we're going through the Beatitudes here, we're going through the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're on the 6th Beatitude in Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. And Jesus says this, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. I'm not used to these short scriptures that we're doing. I feel like I want to read the whole thing. But let's pray before we get into this. God, we want to know what it means to be pure in heart. Lord, we want to know what it means to see you. So, God, we just take this time together, and we just recognize, God, we spent some time painting over issues in our lives. And what we really need is to get down in there and fix the ultimate problem. And so, God, would you speak to us today? How can we do this? How can we address this issue in our own lives? And I ask this all in Jesus' name. Amen. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. The song came on the radio the other day, and it's this Rolling Stones song. And I used to love this song when I was a teenager. It's called Paint It Black. You guys ever hear Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones? When you're a teenager, you're just mad about everything, mad about the world. And, my life's so miserable. And this song, Paint It Black, used to come on when I was a teenager, and I'd roll down the windows, drive down Grand River, and just scream it out. And it's all about how miserable your life is. The lyrics, one of the lyrics that really spoke to me was, "I look inside myself and see my heart is black. I see my red door and I want it painted black. Maybe then I'll fade away and not have to face the facts. It's not easy facing up when your whole world is black." And I would sing this as a teenager and be like, "Yeah, my heart is black and nobody understands." You guys know that song, Paint It Black? That's like candy to an angsty teen, they just eat it right up. So the song came on the radio the other week, and I was playing it for my kids. I was like, I used to listen to this song, and they're like, "What in the world is this?" This isn't the worship music that Mom plays for us. But it speaks to something inside of us. We look inside our hearts and see it painted black. And I think it really does speak to people, because we recognize, I've got issues. We recognize there's things inside of us. I have tendencies that I'm kind of ashamed of. There's thoughts that I have that really I would be terribly embarrassed if you were to put them up on the screens. I have anger issues. I look inside my heart and I see I'm stressed all the time. I deal with anxiety. I have addictions. I'm hooked on these things. I can't stop going to these websites. I have these lusts, these attractions that I'm just so ashamed of. And so we say, well, the goal is make sure nobody sees that stuff. Make sure that it's painted over. We don't want these things leaking out anytime. And so, but we do. We look inside our hearts and we see, it's black. We see it painted black. And then Jesus comes along and he says, Jesus was before the Rolling Stones, but Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." And then we look around and we think, I'm just glad no one else sees what I see. I pure in heart, I just am trying to show everyone else that I really don't have the issues that I'm struggling with. And we hope that no one else sees it. We hope that this thing that's inside of us doesn't leak out somewhere and somebody can pick up on it. And so we spend all our time trying to hide it. Well, I hate to burst your bubble today, but like the video said, God can see it. God does see the heart. He looks inside your heart and he sees those things that we're ashamed of. And that may be a scary moment for us. But Jesus is so concerned with the heart. Why is he so concerned with the heart? Isn't that interesting? Jesus was constantly battling with this group of people called the Pharisees. The Pharisees were maybe the religious elite of the day. They were like the top church folks. They spent all their time following all the rules and doing everything right and making sure everybody knows how well they follow the rules and knows how often they go to the synagogues and knows how often they pray. But they seem like they have everything together. They follow all the rules to a T. But Jesus, when Jesus shows up on the scene, he's not going out and like berating and yelling at the sinners, the people he would think that Jesus would be yelling at. Jesus usually has to confront these Pharisees, these religious people, these church people. Jesus says in Matthew 23 something very interesting. Here's Jesus concerned with the heart. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." He continues, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will also be clean." So here's Jesus, who shows up on the scene, and he's got religion. There's church. Like Jesus didn't invent any of that stuff. These people are doing it, but he's saying, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're focusing on the outside when really it's the inside you need to focus on. He calls them whitewashed tombs. Here's a tomb that looks really nice on the outside, but on the inside, it's full of dead bones. And in the Jewish culture, that would be seen as like an unclean thing. You're not supposed to touch dead things. He's saying that's what you're like in the inside. What's the point of you cleaning up the outside if that's what the inside looks like? Jesus is concerned with the heart because he knows that the heart is the main problem. That's the main problem we need to concentrate on. Not painting over that spot that shows up every so often. It's the heart. When you go in to change your oil, you're supposed to change the oil in your car. Just so you guys know. You're supposed to do this every so often. And you have arguments about how often you're supposed to do it, but everybody agrees you're supposed to do it. Now, if you were to go in to change your oil, and all you did, well, there's two things that happen when you go in to change your oil. You get new oil, and they put a new filter in, or you put a new filter in. You can tell that I don't change my own oil. If you just went in and put new oil in every time, you drain the old oil out, put new oil in, and you never ever changed the filter, it really wouldn't matter that you're going and putting nice clean oil in because the filter's all gunked up. If your filter's all gunked up, then bad things are going to happen. You're going to overheat. Something's going to happen to your car. Our heart is like that filter. If our heart is dirty, if our heart is gunked up, if there's things in there that are messed up and need changing, then it's going to affect everything else. If our heart's dirty, then our whole lives are going to be dirty. I love this story. And maybe it's an April Fool's story. April Fool's was yesterday. But this story of this grandpa who's sleeping on the sofa, and his two grandkids want to play a prank on him, so they get some Limburger cheese from the refrigerator. And it has to be Limburger because Limburger is a really smelly cheese. And they go up to the grandpa and they rub Limburger cheese all on his mustache. And they wake up the grandpa, and grandpa wakes up, and he gets up off the couch, and he goes, oh boy, this room stinks. Something smells terrible in this room. So he goes to the kitchen to try to get away from it, and he gets into the kitchen. He goes, oh, the kitchen stinks. What's wrong with this place? And he runs into his bedroom and smells, oh, the bedroom stinks. He says, this whole house stinks. And he runs out the door, and he opens the door just to get a fresh breath, and he takes a deep breath in, and he says, oh, the whole world stinks. The moral of the story is, the whole world stinks when you have Limburger cheese in your mustache. When your heart is black, when your heart is dirty, the whole world is black. When there's something wrong with the filter, when there's something wrong with the source, then everything else gets affected. We try to blame our faults and our stress and our sins and all these things that go wrong. We try to blame our miserable life on everything else, the circumstances that we're in, or what they said to us, or all this stuff. But Jesus said, no, you know what? It's the heart. That's the issue. It's the heart is the important thing. I asked my wife to make up a couple slides. I don't know if we have. There's a slide in there that I think of things visually. So we like to think, or the world likes to say, if you have bad things happening, or if you have to get your act together, what you really need is a change of circumstances. But really, what Jesus is saying is, whether the circumstances in your life are good or whether they're bad, if you've got a bad heart, if your heart is black, if something's wrong with your heart, everything is going to come out bad. So the world will say, well, you just need to change your circumstances. Well, no. If you've got good circumstances and you filter it through a black heart or a bad heart, it's going to come out bad. It doesn't matter the circumstances. You can sit there and think, oh, I just need to change the circumstances, but it's not that needs changing. What Jesus says, and if you go to the next slide, we need a pure heart. And then it doesn't matter the circumstances are good or bad. If it's filtered through the pure heart, everything comes out good. So the world will say, it's the circumstances we need to concentrate. You need to get better circumstances. You need to get a better job. You need to get a better spouse. That's all you really need. You just need to, whatever's stressing you out in your life, really you just need to change that thing, and then you'll be fine. Jesus is saying, no, it's the heart that needs to be changed. What's interesting is the religious people will say, the Pharisees and some church people will say, really what you need to change is your actions. The thing on the right. Really what you need to change is you just change your actions and everything else will be fine. Well, wait a second. It's not the circumstances that need to change, and it's not really even our actions that need to change. That's what the Pharisees thought. Jesus said it's your heart that needs to change, because when your heart is changed, then everything else will follow from that. But the circumstances aren't going to matter. If you're a stressful person and you're counting on your circumstances to change, to not be stressed anymore, guess what? It's not going to happen. If you're a stressful person, things could be totally fine, and you're still going to be a stressful person. You're still going to deal with anxiety. And you think, oh, shoot, I was hoping for my circumstances to change. No, if that's what you're dealing with, that's not going to change based on your circumstances. It's your heart that needs to change. We don't need a change in circumstances. We don't need a change in things that happen to us. That's the world's way. We don't even need a change in actions. That's the religious way or the Pharisees' way. We need a change in heart. Jesus says in it's Mark chapter 7. Actually, he says this in Matthew 2. Mark chapter 7, verse 14 through 15. Jesus called the crowd to him and said, so here's Jesus, and he's calling the crowd to him, and he says, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. It's like I can picture Jesus saying, listen, guys, you got to get this. Maybe Jesus is pinching, maybe he's stressed. All right, guys, listen, you need to understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. You listen and understand this. It's not what you put in. It's not the type of food you're eating. It's not even the shows you watch. It's not the rituals that you do. It's not the circumstances that you're in that's going to make you unclean. Rather, it's what's coming out of your heart that makes you unclean. That's the thing we need to worry about. You could be the most holy looking person in the world. You could abstain from every single thing. You could cloister yourself up in a little monastery. And Jesus says, it doesn't matter if you're just holy looking. It's about the heart. You can't escape your way into holiness. It's said that sometimes Christians can be the most unloving and the most really hate-filled people in the world. And you ask the Christians, well, where is this coming from? And they say, well, it's this, and it's them, and it's that, and it's this, and oh, back in my day, and this, and that, and that. And it's like, well, no, it's not coming from any of that stuff. It's coming from in here. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. It's the heart that matters. We need a change of heart. But how do we do this? When we try to attempt to be pure in heart, when we try to attempt having purity of heart, what ends up happening inevitably is we end up looking like Pharisees. I don't know if you ever noticed this. Think about what it would mean for you if I said, hey, you need to be holy, be pure. What comes to your mind? What actions do you come to your mind do you need to take so you could be holy? Maybe you think, well, I should probably stop swearing. I do that too much. Or maybe you think, I should volunteer more at the church. Maybe you think, I should stop thinking these thoughts. I should stop being rude. But whatever you end up thinking in your quest to be pure, really you end up looking like Pharisees. I mean, that's all the things that the Pharisees say, the Pharisees wanted to do. If that's all it means to be holy, is I better stop this, I better stop this, I better stop this, I better do this and cloister myself away, then our goal isn't looking like Jesus, our goal is looking like a Pharisee. And that's not right. That's not the right view of holiness. That's not the right view of purity. That's the technique of just painting over the spot on the wall. When you just try to change your actions, that's the technique of just ignoring the real problem. And it seems like it works for a bit. When maybe you get in the same argument with your spouse. You've had the same argument 100 times. You've been married for 100 years, it feels like. And you get in this argument, and then and maybe you say, okay, yeah, we need to do better. And then things are fixed for maybe a day. Maybe your husband brings flowers the next day, and you think, oh, this isn't going to be, okay, maybe this will work out. And then the next day, nothing kind of happens, and then the third day, and then the fourth day, it's the same thing. And it's like, well, what happened here? And we do the same thing with our life. It's the same. You struggle with this thing, and you think it's good for a bit, but then all of a sudden, the spot shows up again, and you think, well, I guess the problem wasn't really addressed. We need to fix the heart, but how do we do it when everything we try just ends up it just ends up changing our actions and not the inside? How do we clean the inside, like Jesus said? Well, we'll get to that. But hold that thought, because I want to look at the second part of the beatitude here. Jesus says something interesting. He says, "Blessed are the pure in heart," and we'll talk about what that means and how to get that in a second. But blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, because they will see God. I think that's interesting, because seeing God in the Bible has two meanings. And I think Jesus means both here. First, it's the obvious meaning of you're going to see God, when you die. You're going to see him. You're going to meet him. And I think Jesus definitely means that. But also the Bible talks about seeing God. It means experiencing God now, not physically, but you see God's hand moving. You see God at work. And I think Jesus means both those things. Those who are pure in heart will see God move in their life. Will be able to see God work in their life. They'll be able to see God moving and working in things. Because God is always working, just we don't recognize it all the time. We don't see it all the time. Jesus says, the pure in heart do, though. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. People can experience the same event, the same circumstances, and come to vastly different conclusions about what's going on, about what's happening. Some people never see God anywhere. Maybe they don't even think God is even there. They never see God in anything or never see him doing anything. And some people say they see God everywhere. So you talk to some people and they see all sorts of stuff. So how do we see him? Well, God is not physically present. We can't go somewhere to see God. We can't go visit him. God is spirit, he's not material. He's spirit. What I think Jesus is saying is, you don't go somewhere to see God. You have to be someone to see God. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. You have to clean up the spirit. You have to clean off, we're so concerned about our physical eyesight. We want to see, we put glasses on so we can see 20/20 or whatever it is. But Jesus is saying, you want to clean off your spiritual lenses. Really what you need to do is clean up your heart. And when you have a pure heart, when you have a clean heart, then you can see what God is doing. We don't go somewhere to see God. You have to be someone to see God. And seeing God is so important. I don't mean, the people that see visions. You may be thinking, didn't the Bible say something like can't nobody see God? Nobody can see God and live? And it's like, yeah, that's exactly what the Bible does say. But Jesus says it's like the wind, experiencing the Spirit. You don't see the wind, but you can see it move. You don't see the wind, but you can feel it. You can see what it does to the trees. That's what he means when he says, when you can see God. Seeing Jesus, or seeing God, is really one of the most important things in life. Knowing that God is with you, feeling his presence with you, seeing him move in your life. I feel like, I can get through anything if I can see God, if I can know what he's doing and see him working. I was just talking with a gentleman from church. He called me up just the middle of the week, and he said, I'm just thinking about Jesus today. I'm just thinking about what he did, and I'm just focusing on him. And he was talking about all the things that God was bringing to his mind, and it sounded like he was having a great day. It was just a normal day. He's got to go to work. He's got to drive around and do all this stuff. But since he's focused on Jesus, he was having such a good time. He had to call up and share with someone. When you focus on Jesus, it really does change that lens. It changes that filter. And when you focus on Jesus, you really do start seeing him everywhere. When you focus on God and focus on who he is, you do start seeing him move. You start seeing him everywhere in all sorts of things. So blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. If you want to see God, we need to clean up our spiritual lens. We need to clean up the heart. So how do we do this? Let's go back to that. How do we do this? What does it mean first to have a pure heart? In the center, you had the Holy of Holies because this is the place it had one single purpose. Nobody could even enter this place because it was set apart for God's purposes. And once a year, the high priest would come in and sprinkle blood on the atonement cover over the Ark of the Covenant. And that was its sole purpose. It was the Holy of Holies, not because it was the most moral or it followed the rules better than any other room. Like, it wasn't about the rules. It was about it's set apart for God's purposes. You wouldn't go into the Holy of Holies and play cards on a Friday night because it had one purpose for it, and that's what made it holy. And everything in the temple was holy. The lampstand was holy. The table they set the bread on, that was all holy. The walls were holy, it says. And you think, why were all these things holy? Were they the nicest of all the things? No, they were set apart for God's purpose. That's what it means to be holy. When Jesus says you need to be pure in heart, you need to have heart holiness, it means being devoted to God. Wholly and entirely dedicated to him. Your whole purpose is for God. It's not for anything else. It's for God. It's not for your own kingdom. It's not for your own wishes. You're set apart for God. That's what it means to be holy. You have a purity of your purpose. You have a purity at heart, means you're pure in terms of your purpose. I'm for God. I live for God, for his purposes. I do what he wants me to do. But it's not about following the rules. And this is the thing that church people get so confused on. Because that's what the Pharisees thought. They thought if they were being holy just by separating themselves. And so the Pharisees didn't want to associate with sinners. They didn't want to associate with tax collectors. They prided themselves on staying away from that stuff. Say, we don't touch that stuff because we're holy. And holiness to us means following all the rules. And we don't want your uncleanliness to mess with what we got going here. Because they didn't want it to infect what they thought of as their holiness. But we aren't called to imitate the Pharisees. We're called to imitate Jesus. So what's the difference between Jesus and the Pharisees here? Think about this. When the Pharisees had a good religious thing going on. They had their church and they had their synagogue and they had all this stuff. And then Jesus comes on the scene. What's the difference? Well, Jesus goes out and he eats with the tax collectors and he eats with the sinners and he fellowships with them and he goes to their homes and he extends mercy to them. And he extends love to them and compassion to them. And he's not worried about their sin infecting him. He wants his holiness to infect them. His holiness doesn't get subverted by someone else's sin. His holiness goes out and it burns away the sin of the world. And so when Jesus shows up, he's eating and fellowshipping with everybody that wrote them off and said, no, I don't want you to, I don't want my holiness to be harmed by you. Jesus says, no, my holiness is going to go out there. So he eats with the tax collectors. He eats with the sinners. He sits with the prostitutes. He's healing the sick. He's washing the unclean. He gets his hands, he washes his disciples' feet. This is what holiness looks like. We're supposed to be used by God, have that purity of purpose. So what does God want from me? What does God want? It's very simple. Jesus says, it can be summed up in two phrases. Love the Lord, your God, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's what it means. And so what does this look like for us? Well, it looks like what Pastor Ralph said last week. It looks like showing mercy to those who no one else is showing mercy to. It looks like showing compassion. It looks like showing forgiveness. We are called to extend love, mercy, compassion, forgiveness to everyone that God loves, to everyone that God does it to. And P.S., that's everyone. That's everyone in the world. When our rules get in the way of that, then I think our rules become part of the same problem. Don't have the Pharisees as the definition of holiness. That's what I'm trying to say. We have Jesus as the definition of holiness. Jesus is the goal. That's the purity of purpose. That's our purity of heart. And Jesus says when the heart is taken care of, this is the interesting thing, when your heart is taken care of, when your heart is devoted to God, then good things are going to come out of your heart. You don't worry about changing the actions. You worry about being devoted to God. Because when that's in place, then the actions are going to follow. Don't worry about cleaning up the outside. The outside will be clean if you focus on the inside. That verse in Matthew that we read where Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, he says, you're cleaning the outside of the cup and dish and you're not cleaning the inside. He says, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Isn't that interesting? First clean out the inside, and the outside will be clean. So how do we do this? How do we clean up the heart? How do we have this purity of purpose? We need the inside clean, but we can't get to the inside, We need heart surgery. We need a change in heart, but we aren't surgeons. And this is the perennial problem. This is why we keep going back for more and more help, because we recognize we can't seem to be able to do this. I volunteer at the Brighton Library often, and they have this book sale that they do twice a year, and I was just doing it yesterday, and we unload all these books, thousands of books we unload, and it's broken off into sections. You got fiction, science fiction, all this stuff, religion, self-help. Over the 10 years or whatever I've been volunteering, the self-help section is just taking over the whole table. If you go to the Brighton Library book sale, which is starting soon, you're going to see the self-help section. We had to pile books underneath. I mean, it's everywhere. It's huge. Why? Because they don't work. If they worked, we wouldn't need all these books. But we keep looking for the answer. How am I going to do this? How am I going to change the actions? How am I going to change even my heart when I can't do it? And we keep looking for answers, but it's not working. If these things did work, we wouldn't need all these books. Someone would have said, okay, hey, here's the answer. This is the irony. We need a change in heart, but we have no power to change our heart. Jeremiah in the Old Testament says the heart is deceitful above everything else. No one can tame it. He says asking someone to change their heart is like asking a leopard to change its spots. The leopard can't do it. And it's the same way with our heart. But nevertheless, God says, but I can do it. I can get in there. I'm the heart surgeon. We can't change our heart. And here's the ironic thing. We can't change our heart, but we can change our actions. God is the one who can change the heart. So here's what happens. When we do change our actions toward Jesus, then God will change our heart. So get this, because this is important. We can't change our heart, but we can change our actions. God can change our heart. When we do change our actions to look like Jesus, then God will change our heart. What that means is you don't go out and try to clean up your act for appearance's sake, changing my actions for myself, trying to make myself look better, try to be a better me. And there's like 100 books that says how to be a better you. That's not what it's about. That's just cleaning the outside. What it means is laying your heart down at the altar and saying, God, I need a change of heart. And then it looks like going out and living the actions that Jesus called us to, loving others, showing mercy, showing compassion. And when we change our actions toward Jesus, then God changes our heart. And I'm just a personal testimony of that. And he's still doing it. He's constantly doing it. But it takes constantly laying your heart down at the altar and saying, God, I need a change of heart. Because it's the same thing all the time. It's the same thing I'm struggling with. I can change my actions, but this thing is still black. I need you to change it. But laying it down at his altar and then getting up and going out and it's just extending forgiveness. And when we extend forgiveness, God changes our heart. When we show mercy, God changes our heart. When we show compassion, God changes our heart. And before you know it, he's got all this heart surgery done on you. And you look back and you say, wow. Think back in the broken pipe in the laundry room. Here we are trying to just paint over the thing, but when you dedicate your heart to God, when you lay it down at the altar, you are painting over the wall, but what's going on behind the scenes is God is mending that broken pipe. What we need to do is not really just paint over it. What we need to do is cut out the drywall and say, God, here it is. I need you to fix this. That makes the difference because then you have God coming in and repair it. And if you truly surrender to him, you find he's not just fixing the leaky pipe. He's trying to build you a brand new one. You think maybe the leaky pipe is what the issue is, but he's really saying, I want a new one. I don't want to just repair. I want to replace it. And he starts with maybe the pipe, but then he builds you a whole new bathroom. And he wants to build you a whole new house. And you say, God, what are you doing? He says, I'm building you a whole new house because I want to live there. I want to live in your heart. So I want to clean it up for my sake. But it takes laying it down at the altar. The team's going to lead us in a song just as we close out in prayer. But I encourage you, lay your heart down at the altars. The altars are open up here. I'm going to be down at the altar, and it can just be between you and God. It doesn't have to be anything else, but just lay it down and say, God, I need some heart surgery today. I need a change of heart. I need to be dedicated to your purposes today. Would you pray with me? Lord, I just, as these altars are open, God, I pray that we would be a church that would be just dedicated to you. Lord, I pray for all the hurt and all the pain that has come from our hearts. Our hearts have become stained and really beyond repair, God. Lord, would you come in to our lives today? Would you come into our hearts and begin to do a change? God, we surrender our hearts to you. We want to be set apart for your purposes. God, do that change in our heart that we would be able to leave here and leave devoted to you, entirely set apart for you, to live out the love and compassion and mercy that Jesus showed. And God, it's a walk. It's a walk, and I know I'm going to stumble, but God, when I do, I just want to place my heart back on your altar. I give you permission today to do that work, and God, I will dedicate myself to living out your purposes for me, to being like Jesus. So Lord, I just give this time to you as we continue in prayer, that you would do some work in our hearts today, and that we would have the strength to surrender that work to you. In Jesus' name.